That particular afternoon, the Melbourne sky was a bruised wash of orange and gold. The sun bled out behind the high-rise commission flats of Footscray, casting long, skeletal shadows across streets humming with the end-of-day rush. Down on the corner of Hopkins and Nicholson Street, near the bustling chaos of the market, a young woman shuffled along, her gait weary, pushing a rattling shopping trolley overloaded with cans and plastic bottles. Her face was smudged with grime, her clothes a collage of op-shop rejects, and her mousy brown hair was a tangled mess under a faded beanie. At a glance, anyone would have pegged her for just another street kid, another piece of the city's forgotten furniture. 17, maybe 18 at most. She called herself Chloe. Most afternoons she was a fixture in this part of town, her eyes scanning the gutters and bins for the glint of aluminium or plastic that meant a few more cents, a few more hours of survival. The locals were used to her, the Vietnamese grandmothers who ran the bakeries, the Ethiopian men sipping coffee outside their cafes, the traders grabbing a souvlaki on their way home. Some offered a nod of pity, most offered nothing at all. She was just part of the scenery, as unremarkable as a graffiti-scarred wall. But beneath the layers of dirt and feigned hopelessness, a secret burned. Chloe was no scavenger. She was a rookie federal agent, recruited straight from the academy for an operation that was as dangerous as it was clandestine. Her mission, to embed herself in the street life of Footscray and get close to a notorious ICE syndicate that used vulnerable kids as mules. It was a world of shadows and whispers, and she was the ghost sent to haunt it. But that day, her luck felt as thin as the worn-out soles of her boots. She was bent over a bin near an old-school Greek cafe, the smell of frying oil thick in the air, when a booming voice shattered the street noise. "Oi, what do you think you're doing here?" Chloe looked up slowly. A big, beefy cop in a crisp Victoria police uniform was striding towards her. His face was a bulldog scowl, and his eyes held the flat, angry glare of a man who enjoyed his authority a little too much. This was Senior Constable Dave Satriani, or Davo, as he was known around the precinct, a cop with a reputation for being a hard ass, a throwback to an older, rougher style of policing. Locals complained about his temper and his heavy hands, but few ever dared to say it to his face. Chloe let her own eyes go vacant, adopting the wary, exhausted look of a girl who expected nothing but trouble. "Just gettin' cans, officer," she mumbled, her voice a raspy whisper. "Cans?" Satriani scoffed, his voice dripping with contempt. "Or are you casing the joint? Looking for something to pinch from the cafe?" Before she could answer, his polished black boot swung out, connecting with the side of her trolley with a sickening crunch. The flimsy wire frame buckled, and the trolley tipped, spilling its contents across the pavement. Empty Coke cans and crushed water bottles clattered and rolled into the gutter. A few patrons at the cafe tables glanced over, their expressions a mixture of shock and weary resignation. They knew Davo's style. No one intervened. Chloe stared at the mess, a hot flush of rage rising in her chest. It was a calculated performance of humiliation, and she was the star. She had to swallow it, had to choke down the instinct to fight back. Her cover was everything. "I wasn't stealing nothing," she said, her voice trembling with practiced fear. "Honest? Just collecting." Satriani wasn't finished. He grabbed the collar of her filthy jumper, yanking her forward until their faces were inches apart. His breath smelled of stale coffee and cigarettes. "Street rats like you are a bloody nuisance. Piss off. Don't let me see your face around here again. You make the place look like a tip." Her jaw tightened. "If you only knew, you arrogant prick," she thought, the words a silent snarl in her mind. "If it wasn't for this job, I'd show you exactly who I am." But on the outside, she just nodded, her head bowed, projecting nothing but submission. An elderly man with a kind, weathered face, the owner of the cafe, finally spoke up from his doorway. His voice was gentle but firm. "Leave her be, Darvo. She's just collecting bottles. Not hurting anyone." Satriani shot him a venomous look. "You stay out of it, Barry. These kids start with cans, next thing you know they're breaking into your shop for the till." The air grew thick with unspoken tension. Everyone knew Satriani was a powder keg, and no one wanted to be near him when he blew. Chloe kept her head down, her mind racing. Just then, a beat-up Holden Commodore pulled up to the curb. Two young blokes got out, Jace and Damo. They were wiry, twitchy, their eyes darting around nervously. Chloe recognized them instantly. They were low-level runners for the syndicate she was investigating. Damo was carrying a heavy-looking black gym bag. Chloe's training kicked in, her senses sharpening. That bag wasn't full of dirty laundry. It was a drop, and it was happening right now. But Satriani, the supposed guardian of the law, was too busy bullying a homeless girl to notice the two suspicious characters right under his nose. His presence was a roadblock, a spanner in the works of both justice and crime. For God's sake, Chloe fumed internally, if he wasn't here, I could tail them. Finally, Satriani shoved her away. "I said, piss off. And don't come back." Chloe scrambled to her feet, acting for all the world like a frightened rabbit. She hurriedly began gathering her scattered cans, stuffing them into the broken trolley. All the while, her eyes were fixed on Jace and Damo. They disappeared into a bluestone laneway that snaked behind the market, the gym bag with them. This was her chance. She had to move. With one last terrified glance at Satriani, she pushed her busted trolley away, then ducked into the same laneway, melting into the shadows. She hadn't realized one crucial thing. Satriani was still watching her, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes. "Something's not right with that kid," he muttered to himself, his policeman's intuition finally kicking in, albeit for all the wrong reasons. "Acts weird." He swung himself onto his police motorbike, and without turning on his lights, began to follow her, completely unaware that he was about to stumble into a game far more dangerous than harassing street kids. The evening chill was setting in. The laneway was damp and narrow, smelling of stale beer and overflowing bins. The last rays of sun didn't reach here, leaving the bluestone walls slick with grime and shadows. Chloe moved carefully, her soft-soled boots making no sound. She kept her head down, pretending to search the bins, every part of her a study in practiced poverty, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. Up ahead, Jason Damo stopped at the back door of a dingy, two-story terrace house. They knocked a specific rhythm on the peeling paint. A moment later, the door creaked open, and a burly, middle-aged man with a shaved head and a mean-looking face emerged. Chloe's breath caught in her throat. She knew that face from dozens of surveillance photos. Uncle Mikko. He was a senior lieutenant in the syndicate, a man known for his brutal efficiency and his knack for disappearing whenever the police got close. He was the primary target of her entire operation. Chloe flattened herself behind a stack of milk crates, her fingers reaching into the pocket of her jeans. They closed around a small object that looked like a cheap disposable vape. It was her panic button, a silent transmitter that would send her location and a distress signal to her team, who were on standby just minutes away. But before she could even think about using it, a heavy footstep crunched on the gravel behind her. Her blood ran cold. She turned her head. Satriani was standing there, his arms crossed, his face a mask of smug suspicion. "Well, well. What have we here?" he said, his voice loud enough to echo down the lane. The sound made Mikko and his two runners spin around. Their faces, already tense, hardened into masks of pure hostility. Panic seized Chloe. If her cover was blown now, the mission was dead, and so was she. She had to think fast, to create a diversion. She shot to her feet, her face contorting into a mask of theatrical tears. "Officer, thank God. Help me," she wailed, pointing a trembling finger at the three men. "They tried to rob me. They wanted to take my trolley." Satriani grunted, thrown off balance. "They tried to rob you?" Jason Damo exchanged a panicked look, their faces flushing red. But Mikko was as cool as a stone. He stepped forward, his eyes narrowed into hateful slits, a predator sizing up his prey. "Easy there, Constable," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Don't listen to this little gutter rat. She's a bloody menace around here. Always trying to pinch things from people's backyards." Satriani looked from Mikko to Chloe, his expression clouded with indecision. Chloe kept up the act, sobbing quietly, hoping her performance was convincing enough. The tension in the laneway was so thick you could taste it. In this dim, forgotten corner of the city, a secret war was being fought with lies and deception, and Chloe was on the front line. The air in the laneway crackled. The single bare bulb above the back door cast a sickly yellow glow, making Mikko's face look even more menacing. Chloe stood her ground, her body language screaming vulnerable victim, while inside, her mind was a whirlwind of calculations. She had to keep Satriani engaged, keep him from looking too closely at Mikko and his crew. Satriani, puffing out his chest, took a step forward, full of bluster. "Don't try and pull a fast one on me, mate. If you've been hassling this kid, I can run all of you in." The threat made Jason Damo visibly nervous, but Mikko just smiled, a thin, humorless curl of his lips. It was the smile of a man who knew how the world really worked. "Constable," he said, his voice deceptively calm, "no need to make a fuss over nothing. This kid's a professional pest. Trust me. Believe her, and you'll regret it." The last few words were spoken with a quiet emphasis that was more threatening than any shout. Satriani hesitated, but his ego wouldn't let him back down in front of an audience. "I don't give a rat's. If you've done nothing wrong, you won't mind a trip down to the station, will ya? We can sort it out there." Chloe's heart sank. A trip to the station would be a disaster. Her fingerprints were in the federal database. Her cover would be blown in minutes. She had to de-escalate, and fast. She dropped to her knees and started gathering her cans again, her voice choked with fake sobs. "Please, officer, I didn't lie. They tried to take my trolley. But please don't take me to the station. I'm scared." She deliberately made herself seem pathetic, hoping to redirect Satriani's focus back to her. Mikko, ever the strategist, saw his opening. He stepped closer to Satriani, clapping a familiar hand on his shoulder. "Look, mate," he said, his tone softening to one of conspiratorial reason. "How about we just settle this here? No need to get tied up with paperwork." As he spoke, his other hand moved swiftly, discreetly slipping a thick, folded roll of $50 notes, a roll of pineapples, into the pocket of Satriani's uniform. Chloe saw the exchange clearly. A wave of disgust and fury washed over her. So the rumors were true. Satriani wasn't just an arrogant bully, he was a bent cop. Satriani glanced down at his pocket, his expression shifting. The self-righteous anger vanished, replaced by a greedy, calculating glint. HMPH. "All right then," he grunted, his decision made. "Suppose it's not worth the trouble. This little rat has been wasting my time all arvo anyway." Chloe felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. This was worse than she imagined. With Satriani on Mikko's payroll, he wasn't just an obstacle, he was part of the enemy's defenses. Mikko's thin smile returned. He nodded to Jason Damo, who who quickly slipped inside the house with the gym bag, disappearing from sight. Satriani turned back to Chloe, his face once again a mask of contempt. "Right, you. Piss off. And if I see you around here again, I'll personally drive you to the youth shelter myself. Got it?" Chloe nodded numbly, dragging her broken trolley away. But the moment she rounded the corner, she stopped. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her mind racing. Her eyes, no longer frightened but sharp as flint, stared back towards the terrace house. "I can't let that shipment go. I have to know what was in that bag. And that bloody cop he's going down with them." Later that night, long after Satriani had roared off on his motorbike, Chloe crept back. Huddled behind a large industrial bin, she waited, her patience a coiled spring. The lights inside the house were dim. She could hear the faint murmur of voices. After what felt like an eternity, the back door opened again. This time it was just Damo, now carrying a much smaller package concealed inside a delivery-style insulated bag. He looked left and right before walking briskly towards a scooter parked at the end of the laneway. "This is it," she thought, and began to move, melting from one shadow to the next, a silent predator on the hunt. But just as she started to gain on him, the deafening roar of a motorbike engine filled the air. Satriani was back. He'd obviously been circling the block, his suspicions still aroused. He spotted Chloe shadowing Damo, and screeched to a halt right in front of her. "You again? What did I bloody tell you?" he yelled, his voice echoing off the brick walls. Chloe froze. Her mind screamed in frustration. If she stopped, Damo would be gone. If she confronted Satriani, her cover was finished. She chose a third option. With a theatrical gasp of fear, she turned and sprinted in the opposite direction, deeper into the maze of residential streets, as if her only goal was to escape the wrathful cop. "Get back here, you little delinquent!" Satriani roared, kicking his bike into gear and giving chase. Meanwhile, Damo, completely oblivious, sped off on his scooter, the drugs disappearing into the Melbourne night. "Damn it!" Chloe hissed under her breath as she ran. "Because of him, I've lost the package." She darted down a narrow walkway between two houses, a space too tight for the motorbike. Satriani was forced to stop, shouting useless threats after her. "You wait till I catch you." Chloe finally escaped, her lungs burning, but her heart was heavy with failure. Her mission that night was a bust. Over the next few days, Chloe continued her charade as a canner, but her mind was a storm of suspicion and strategy. The syndicate was planning something big, she could feel it. And Satriani was the gatekeeper. The problem was bigger than she'd thought. One afternoon, while pretending to sort her collection under a bridge, she saw Satriani chatting amicably with Jace outside a pub. They were laughing, sharing a smoke like old mates. The sight made her blood boil. He wasn't just taking bribes, he was part of their network. She knew she had to report it, but she couldn't risk a direct line of communication. That night, in the sterile quiet of a 24-hour laundromat, she pulled out her vape pen. With a series of coded clicks, she sent an encrypted text to her handler. Primary target Miko. Confirmed involvement VicPaul officer. Satriani, D. Request surveillance on officer. Continuing observation. The message sent, she pocketed the device and vanished back into the night. A few days later, her patience paid off in a way that chilled her to the bone. She tailed Satriani after his shift, following his motorbike from a safe distance. He didn't go home. Instead, he drove to a derelict industrial area by the railway lines, pulling up outside a vast, rust-streaked warehouse. Chloe concealed herself in the overgrown weeds, her heart pounding to the rhythm of a passing freight train. The warehouse door creaked open, and Miko stepped out to meet him. They spoke in low, serious tones. From their body language, Chloe knew this was more than a simple bribe. This was a high-level meeting. She saw Mikko pass Satriani a thick manila envelope. This was the proof she needed. This was everything. She shifted her weight for a better view, but the rotten wooden pallet she was standing on gave way with a loud crack. Both men whipped their heads in her direction. "Who's there?" Mikko snarled. Panic flared in Chloe's chest. She scrambled to her feet and ran. "Get her!" Satriani yelled, his voice raw with shock and fury. "Don't let her get away." Several of Mikko's thugs poured out of the warehouse, and the chase was on. Chloe sprinted through the dark, unlit yards, the sounds of their pursuit echoing behind her. As she risked a glance over her shoulder, her eyes met Satriani's. In that split second, she saw the dawning horror and recognition on his face. He finally understood that the pathetic street kid he'd been tormenting was something else entirely. That night, Chloe managed to escape, but the stakes had been raised to a terrifying new level. It wasn't just the syndicate that knew someone was watching. It was the corrupt cop who had everything to lose. And in the depths of her soul, Chloe knew her time undercover was about to come to a violent, unavoidable end. The night air in Footscray was cold and damp. A recent downpour had left the laneways slick and treacherous, the smell of wet asphalt mingling with the ever-present odor of bin juice. Chloe's lungs burned as she ran, her breath coming in ragged, desperate gasps. Her thin jumper was soaked through, and her face was spattered with muddy water. Behind her, the heavy footfalls and angry shouts of Mikko's thugs grew closer. "There she is. Don't let the bitch get away." She glanced back. Two of them, built like brick shithouses, were closing the distance. Her mind raced, mapping out the labyrinth of alleys she'd spent weeks memorizing. The main road was too open. The railway tracks were a death trap. The dense grid of residential terraces was her only chance. She veered sharply left, vaulted over a low fence, and plunged into a narrow walkway cluttered with laundry lines and forgotten children's toys. The scent of fabric softener and damp earth filled her nostrils. But her luck had run out. One of the thugs, smarter than he looked, had circled around. He emerged from a side path, blocking her way, a cruel grin spreading across his face. "Goin' somewhere, love," he sneered. Chloe skidded to a halt, her heart hammering against her ribs. The thug advanced slowly while his mates caught up from behind. She was trapped in a dead end. Her eyes darted around, landing on a discarded length of fence paling. She snatched it up, her small frame radiating a courage she didn't feel. "Stay back," she warned, her voice low and steady. The man just laughed. "Look at this. The little street rat thinks she's a tiger. You reckon you can take on the three of us with a bit of wood?" They moved in unison. Chloe swung the paling, connecting with one man's shoulder. He grunted in pain, but the other two were on her in an instant. One grabbed her arms from behind, while the other wrenched the wood from her grasp. She struggled, kicking and twisting, but their strength was overwhelming. A fist slammed into her cheek, and the world exploded in a flash of white-hot pain. She crumpled to the grimy pavement. "Get her to Mikko," one of them grunted, hauling her to her feet. They dragged her limp body back the way they came. Pain throbbed in her head, but through the haze, her training took over. Her left hand, unseen by her captors, fumbled in her pocket. Her fingers found the vape pen. With the last of her strength, she squeezed it twice in a specific sequence. A tiny LED blinked once, then went dark. The signal was sent. "Come on, guys," she prayed. "Get here fast." Minutes later, she was thrown onto the concrete floor of the same warehouse. The cavernous space was lit by a single, dangling bulb that cast long, dancing shadows. The air was thick with the smell of dust and stale cigarette smoke. Uncle Mikko sat on a wooden crate, his arms crossed, his eyes boring into her. Standing beside him, looking pale and grim, was Dave Satriani. "So," Mikko began, his voice dangerously soft. "Who are you?" Chloe kept her head bowed, her hair hiding her bruised face. She said nothing. "I'll ask you one more time," Mikko continued, his voice hardening. "What were you doing spying on us? Don't tell me you're just a canner. No canner I know would have the guts to follow people around at night." Chloe remained silent. Her heart was a frantic drum, but she forced her expression to remain blank, innocent. Satriani stepped forward, his eyes narrowed. "I knew there was something off about you from the start," he hissed. "Your whole act, it was too good. Who do you work for?" She held her breath, knowing a single wrong word could be her last. Mikko stood up and walked over to her. Without warning, his hand shot out and he slapped her hard across the face. The sound echoed in the cavernous room. "Talk, you little bitch. Are you a Fed? A cop?" Fresh blood trickled from the corner of her lip. She slowly raised her head, looking directly into Mikko's eyes. A flicker of defiance burned through the pain. I'm just a scavenger," she whispered hoarsely. "I was just looking for stuff to sell." Mikko let out a harsh, disbelieving laugh. "A scavenger who can outrun my boys and fights like a cornered dingo. I'm not that stupid, darling." Satriani watched, a muscle twitching in his jaw. There was a flicker of doubt, of something akin to guilt, in his eyes. He had become a monster, but watching this young woman, this girl, be brutalized was stirring a part of him he thought was long dead. Meanwhile, outside the warehouse district, the quiet of the night was being disturbed. A few residents had heard the chase, the shouts. Mr. Tran, an elderly Vietnamese man who ran a nearby restaurant, had seen them drag Chloe into the warehouse from his back kitchen window. He recognized her as the quiet girl who sometimes collected bottles from his bins. "Poor kid," he murmured to himself. He picked up his phone and made a call to a nephew, who was a local PTV officer. "Something bad is happening at the old warehouse," he said urgently. That small act of kindness, combined with Chloe's distress signal, set the wheels of rescue in motion. Back in the warehouse, the interrogation was turning savage. Mikko had his thugs work her over, but Chloe wouldn't break. She knew if she admitted who she was, they would kill her without a second thought. Satriani stood in the corner, his face a storm of conflict. "What have I gotten myself into?" His mind screamed. "I'm a cop. I'm supposed to protect people. Not watch them get beaten to death, for a few $1,000. Mikko knelt in front of her, grabbing her chin and forcing her to look at him. "You're a tough one, I'll give you that. But you're still just a girl. And we have ways of making people disappear. By tomorrow, no one will ever know you existed." Chloe's blood ran cold. He was going to sell her, or worse. Just then, a faint sound drifted in from the outside. The distant, unmistakable wail of police sirens. Whoop, whoop. Mikko shot to his feet. "Shit! Who called them?" His men scrambled in panic, grabbing weapons and moving to barricade the doors. Satriani froze, his face ashen. He looked at Chloe, still tied to a chair, and then at the door. Understanding, then fear, then rage flashed across his face. "It was you," he snarled. "You're really a bloody Fed." Chloe just met his gaze, her bruised face impassive. Her silence was more damning than any confession. Her moment had come. A voice boomed through a megaphone from outside. "Victoria Police. This is the Special Operations Group. You are surrounded. Come out with your hands up. Mikko swore violently and turned on Satriani. You're a cop. You were supposed to keep this area clean. How the hell did the SOG find us? Satriani was speechless, sweat beading on his forehead. He was trapped. Side with Mikko and he was looking at life in prison, or a bullet from a tactical response unit. Surrender, and his career, his life, everything was over. All his dirty secrets would come pouring out. Chloe looked at him, her eyes pleading. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the chaos. There's still a part of you that's a cop, Dave. You still have a choice. Make the right one. Before it's too late. Her words hit him like a physical blow. For the first time, the arrogant, corrupt cop felt himself truly falter. Mikko jabbed a finger in his face. Finish this. Or I swear to God, you'll be the first one I put a bullet in. Satriani's hand went to the service pistol on his hip. It trembled as he drew it. His eyes darted between Chloe, Mikko, and the warehouse door, which was now shuddering under the force of a battering ram. At that moment, he knew his life had come to a crossroads, and the path he chose in the next 5 seconds would define him forever. Police? Open the door or we'll force it open, the megaphone blared again. Mikko was frantic, his composure finally cracking. He turned to his men. Get your shooters ready. No one gets in here alive. The chilling sound of metal scraping on metal filled the room, as his thugs armed themselves with rusty machetes and cheap handguns. In the eye of the storm stood Satriani, his face a mess of terror and indecision. The pistol in his hand felt impossibly heavy. Chloe, still bound to the chair, watched him, her own life hanging on his next move. Dave, she said, her voice quiet but clear. Don't add another mistake to the pile. Show them who you really are. Her words were a key turning a lock deep inside him. A montage of his life flashed before his eyes. The proud look on his father's face the day he graduated from the academy, the oath he'd sworn to uphold the law and protect the innocent. All of it had been buried under years of cynicism, greed, and the slow corrosion of his soul. His hand, which had been trembling, suddenly grew steady. Mikko noticed the change. What are you waiting for, you useless prick? Make a choice. Us or them. Boom. The warehouse door splintered under another blow from the ram. Satriani gritted his teeth. His gaze shifted from Chloe's bruised, but resolute face to Mikko's snarling one. A decision crystallized. Bang! A single gunshot exploded in the enclosed space, deafeningly loud. But the bullet didn't hit Chloe, nor did it fly towards the door. It ripped into the corrugated iron ceiling above. Satriani had fired a warning shot. Mikko stared at him in disbelief. Are you insane? It's over, Mikko, Satriani said, his voice shaking but firm. I've gone too far. I'm a cop. And I'm choosing my side. In one fluid motion, he spun and aimed his pistol squarely at Mikko's chest. Let her go. Now? At that exact moment, the main door burst from its hinges. Dozens of black-clad SOG officers swarmed in, screaming commands, their assault rifles equipped with blinding tactical lights. Police? Hands in the air. Get down. Chaos erupted. A brief, furious firefight broke out as Mikko's men made a futile attempt to resist. The sound of automatic weapons fire was terrifying. Through the mayhem, Mikko shoved Satriani aside and made a break for a back exit. But Satriani tackled him, and the two big men crashed to the floor, trading brutal punches. Just as Mikko gained the upper hand, Chloe, using the last of her adrenaline-fueled strength, kicked her chair over, using it to trip him. The move gave Satriani the opening he needed. He twisted Mikko's arm behind his back, pinning him to the ground. "It's finished, Mikko," he yelled, his voice cracking with exhaustion and relief. Other officers immediately swarmed in and slapped handcuffs on Mikko, who was spitting curses and threats. "You're a dead man, Satriani. A dead man." Once the warehouse was secure, a senior federal agent in a suit hurried over to Chloe. "Chloe, are you all right?" he asked, his voice full of concern. The remaining local cops and the onlookers who had gathered outside stared in stunned silence. The filthy street kid was being addressed by her first name by a federal commander. The agent cut her bonds. As Chloe stood up, the light caught her face, revealing not the vacant look of a down-and-out teen, but the sharp, intelligent eyes of a trained officer. The whispers started rippling through the crowd. My God, she was undercover. Satriani was pulled to his feet, his uniform torn, his face bleeding. He knew it was over. The federal agent looked at him with cold disdain. "Senior Constable Satriani, you're coming with us. You have a lot to answer for." Satriani didn't resist. As two officers cuffed him, his eyes met Chloe's. His face was a wreck of shame, regret, and a strange flicker of relief. "You still had a choice," Chloe said quietly, for his ears only. "And in the end, you made the right one." Satriani gave a bitter, humorless smile. "A bit late for that, isn't it?" He was led away, his head bowed, the weight of his collapsed world crushing him. In the days that followed, the story of the Footscray drug bust was all over the news. The media sensationalized the capture of Uncle Mikko and the dismantling of his syndicate. But the real buzz was about the young, female undercover agent who had posed as a homeless girl. Chloe became a momentary legend, her bravery celebrated. She accepted a quiet commendation from her superiors, out of the public eye. "You did exceptional work, Chloe," her commander told her. "But remember, this life means you're always a ghost. Ready for the next assignment?" She just nodded, a faint smile on her lips. She knew the fight was endless. As for Satriani, he was formally investigated. The evidence of his corruption was overwhelming. However, his actions in the final moments of the raid, his cooperation in subduing Mikko, were taken into account. In an internal tribunal, he was dishonorably discharged from the Victoria Police, his career and reputation in ruins. But he was spared a prison sentence. The decision was controversial, but for Satriani, it was a form of bleak mercy. He accepted it without a word, packed his bags, and disappeared from the city, returning to the small country town where he'd grown up, hoping to find a quiet life as a farmhand. Every now and then, as he stared out over the vast, empty paddocks, he would hear a young woman's voice in his head, "You still have a choice." One crisp morning, weeks later, Chloe walked through the Footscray market. People looked at her differently now, with a mixture of awe and respect. A Vietnamese stallholder pressed a piece of fruit into her hand. "Thank you," she said softly. "You make our home safe." Chloe just smiled. She didn't need the praise. The knowledge that she had made a difference was enough. She still carried a worn-out backpack, a symbol of her readiness to become someone else, somewhere else, whenever her country called. As she walked towards the train station, the morning sun illuminated her face. The bruises had faded, but the experience had left invisible scars, a new depth in her eyes. She was a warrior who wore the camouflage of the forgotten.